So we'll get that other quotes as well to do some comparative shopping. We've looked at other people in the past. There was a new player, and we let them settle out a little bit and establish themselves. So they've been here for 2 or 3 years now, so we're going to get a quote from them. There's not very many carriers that actually write fire districts for workers' comp. You're limited to these, for the most part, two carriers that are providing that service. There might be a third that's kind of coming on board I've heard about, but again, not established.
Okay. And the final thing that we've already got that we've started working on is the comprehensive capital plan. And we looked at a 10-year plan, and instead of dealing with the ebbs and flows of capital needs, what we did is, Chief Pachura and other program managers got together and figured out what the capital needs were year by year. A lot of that work was done during the bond process, but now without the bond, we've got to fund this through the levy. And instead of having to raise and lower taxes based on the ebbs and flows of capital expenses, we've set up a level funding amount that can get plugged into the budget on an annual basis and essentially fund a capital replacement fund. And then from there, capital purchases will be made out of that fund based on the capital improvement plan, without a significant impact either way to the budget year over year. So when the number we're looking at is, starting the capital replacement plan or capital fund with a set dollar amount, and then funding it $1.5 million a year for the next 10 years. So the first year we may only spend, $750,000, but then the next year we may spend $4 million. And those aren't actual numbers. I'm just the concept of the plan. So that way it's a level funding, go forward basis from the levy standpoint, but it meets the needs from a capital standpoint as well. And there's some other funds that I'll talk about in the next slide here that we want to work on as well going forward. So with that, kind of what our goals are in all budget processes, and specifically this year. So obviously a balanced budget, while meeting the operational needs of the community. We're trying to manage increases in expenses. Unfortunately, Sedona Fire District is not unique to inflation and costs going up. Every one of our clients are seeing costs go up. In the private sector, we see costs go up. So the areas that we're addressing are operational expenses, which is obviously a smaller percentage of our expenses. Our operational expenses are our utilities, our fuel, our supplies. But we do see those increase, and so we have to manage those. We renegotiate contracts on a regular basis. A good example is our copier lease. Last year, renegotiated that and saw significant savings there. So we're constantly reevaluating our operational expenses and renegotiating contracts as best we can to see savings there. Salaries and wages, again, that's one of our largest personnel, is our largest expense that as a percentage. Administration, management, and the local union are working on an MOU right now to address that area as best we can, or best they can, I should say. Healthcare costs, again, we've been lucky over the last couple of years on not seeing significant increases in healthcare costs. It's too soon right now before the insurance carriers will start giving quotes for next year, so I have not actually seen any increases yet for next. Actually, I take that back. I've seen one increase come out at 3.5%. So I'm hoping we see others kind of follow along those lines. But also, that healthcare increases also depend on usage as well, similar to workers' comp. We talked about PSPRS, and then another piece that we're trying to work around is we've commissioned a few economic studies for our clients in Maricopa County, and I know Melissa spoke with you guys about this last month on what our future of our assessed value is going to be. And so we have engaged the Rounds Group to provide a 10-year market analysis on the assessed value for Sedona Fire District for both counties, Yavapai and Coconino County. So we can plug in our projections, more accurate numbers, more accurate estimations based on an economist approach for what we anticipate the assessed value to go to future years to help us with our planning. Because obviously when we go through the budget process, one of the things I'm looking at is not only what happens to the budget today and the decisions that are made today for that budget, but what's that long-term impact? What's that 3-year, what's that 5-year, and what's that 10-year impact? Because I need to make sure from my job and what the board's hired me to do is we're keeping ourselves within the parameters of the law and also building a strong financial sustainable organization now and into the future. So that's why I appreciate the board for supporting that decision, because that helps us do our job by having somebody else take a look at the numbers from an economic standpoint. And then finally, the last big thing for this year is the growth of our operating and capital funds. When you guys first engaged with me, one of my biggest concerns was the limited fund balance for the organization based on its size. And in the next slide here, you'll see how we've already started growing. But we do need to continue to work for that level funding to capital. We need to have that comprehensive 10-year plan that is continually reevaluated and looked at. One of the other concerns I have, and we have as a district, is the end leave liability. So those compensated absences, both is also being looked at now from an MOU perspective, but it's also being looked at from my end on a finance perspective on developing a funding mechanism for that. Currently what we do is we budget a set amount every year for end leave liability, but what happens at the end of the year is that money just kind of gets rolled back into the general fund if it doesn't get utilized. And what I want to do this year is segregate that money out. So when we do have, and we will have, retirements coming up in the future years, we again don't have to rely on the levy and changes in the levy to to fund these things. And then finally, just building a sustainable or a strong financial reserve.
Gabe, I have one question on that end leave. Is that referring to the accrued vacation, accrued sick time, all the accrued times that a member would
That's
have
correct.
when they leave? Okay.
Yeah. And then, like I said, the final piece is the financial reserves. You know, given the size of the organization, following government finance officer's recommendation on fund balance, you know, we should be sitting around $3 million unrestricted fund balance. We are, when you see here in a second, we are getting much closer to that. We're actually almost there once we move the money to capital and set aside some initial funding for the end leave. I think we're going to be pretty close even after this year. But that's something we need to continue to monitor and not get ourselves back in a situation where we're basically borrowing our funds to operate. And that needs to be there as our contingency, as also our funding mechanism for the first half of the year. Remember that we have to start the year off with relatively little to no revenue until we see first half taxes. So with that, just wanted to show you this quick slide here. And if you remember, when I first came on board, we were looking, I believe, at 2015, 2016 time period, and you can see from the high at 6.9 million in 2013, we dropped to 3.6, and have slowly been climbing up to this year ended at the highest level since 2013 at 5.7 million. So that's a much healthier fund balance. Once we allocate the money out appropriately, we're going to be, as I said, I feel like we're going to be in a good place from a fund balance perspective, but we still need to always be monitoring that, making sure we're staying within reasonable limits.
Gabe, what was the reason for the big drop from 2013 to 2014?
If memory serves me correctly, I believe that was when, instead of raising the mill rate, the board had elected to fund the operation from reserves.
So spending our savings to fund our ongoing operations.
Correct. So, last little piece here, kind of the proposed budget schedule. Obviously, here we are today, February 21st, for the initial budget workshop, board workshop. On March 9th, program directors, program managers need to have all their budget requests submitted back to finance. And at that point, and it's already begun with the chiefs, they're working with program managers on what their needs actually are. And as they submit those back to me, the things that we're looking at is one of the things that I do in a budget process is I look at, one, what the needs are. I look at what we've actually done in the past. And I look at what, as I said before, what the impact is of this going forward. So as we're working through that process, I'm getting from the program managers and from the chiefs what our current needs are today.
How big a window was that, Gabe, that you're talking about, that you look in the past and you looked at the future?
So on going back, certain things I go back 5 years, other things I go back 3 years, so 3 to 5 years on going back. And forward, I really focus on the next 5 years, but we run the projections out 10 years.
Thank you.
So we'll come back to the board on the 21st with a more developed budget. The other big thing that we're working on right now is we're redeveloping our employee budget shell, which will allow us to break down the cost literally by employee, a fully burdened cost per employee, which makes it easier from my perspective and from a management perspective to be able to isolate and identify costs on the personnel side. March through May, we'll be meeting with the rest of the vendors to kind of firm up the numbers, as Chief mentioned, working with workers' comp carrier, health insurance carrier, and property and casualty insurance, getting all those numbers firmed up. So when we come to kind of the April meeting, there should be little changes then to the budget at that point going forward. And then at the May meeting, we'll present the final budget in its entirety. And at that point, ask the board to tentatively adopt the budget. If the board does adopt, we post for 20 days, both on the website and public posting. And then we come back on June 20th for the board meeting where there'll actually be a public hearing on the budget. And then hopefully at that point, final adoption of the budget. So we could have everything into the county by July 1. So with that, I know this was a little brief, but at this point, I mean, looking for some direction for us as we continue forward on the budget process, and if there's any other questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Budget books? Budget books?
Yes. I would anticipate budget books no later than April, because there will definitely be a lot of changes come March. Definitely by March, so I don't believe we'll necessarily have the budget books by March, but definitely by April you'll have the full budget books.
We'll have them before the April meeting.
Before the
They'll have
April
them
meeting.
before the
So
April meeting.
after the March meeting, we'll be able to finalize, because at that point you're going to see more of the numbers, and then we can take some more direction at that point, make changes, and have budget books prepared right after that. So end of March, beginning of April, budget books will be ready.
Okay. Any comments? Okay. All right, we'll start our regular business meeting now, public forum.
I have received one request to address the board.
Okay.
Mr. Dwight Kadar, and he would like to represent the district taxpayers, and he has a written presentation and requested to do that.
We're still on a 3-minute time requirement.
Before I start, I'm a little bit surprised at your comment, Chairman, that you didn't receive any documentation. You received a October 30th letter from me to each of the board members outlining some of the issues, and Mr. Whittington received a memo.
Excuse me, Mr. Kadar. Mr. Chair, is this part of his 3 minutes or not?
This is in his 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Sorry to interrupt
you just took 15 seconds of my 3 minutes.
We'll add that to it.
Okay. And Mr. Whittington received a January 26th letter from me. I have documents for that, so I will read my statement. As advocates for the district taxpayers, the Sedona Fire District Governing Board has an obligation to immediately remove Board Member Ernster for his unethical actions during last year's bond election. In the October 30th, 2017 letter to the governing board members and the January 26th, 2018 letter to Mr. Whittington, legal counsel, to the Sedona Fire District, documentation identifying Whittington's unethical actions were provided and have been confirmed by obtaining opinions from multiple councils. Ernster was chairman of the SAFD Citizens Advisory Committee, which recommended the bond issue election to the board. Ernster also was a member of the governing board who voted in favor of proceeding with the bond. In addition, Ernster, as board member, posted a letter on social media stating, quote, "Without passage of the bond issue, the tax levy will have to be increased significantly over the next 10 years to complete all the projects and will cost the taxpayers more than the proposed bond issue," close quote. With that statement, Ernster, as board member, attempted to manipulate district taxpayers into believing that they had to vote for the bond issue or they would suffer the dire consequences regarding the ability of the fire district to financially support public safety. Had Ernster recused himself from that meeting because of his conflict of interest, as he should have, the board vote would have been 2-2 tie, the bond election would not have proceeded, and the fire district, and therefore we, the taxpayers, would not have spent over $31,000 for bond expenses. In addition, as advocates for the taxpayers, the Sedona Fire District Governing Board has an obligation to seek full recovery of bond election-related expenses from Mr. Whittington or his law firm, errors and omissions liability policy, for his failure to, the failure of his legal and professional obligation to inform the governing board of Mr. Ernster's conflict of interest. In addition, the governing board has the obligation to consider terminating Mr. Whittington for his failure of his legal and professional obligation in informing the governing board of Mr. Ernster's conflict of interest. As the Fire District Board has decided to make this a public last month, I am providing copies of this memo and others to the Red Rock News and request that they print them in the paper. I'm also requesting that this documentation, which I have for you, will be part of your official records. Thank you.
All right, moving on. Consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I motion to approve the consent agenda as stated in the agenda.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Gabe, I think you're back up again.
Now I'm back up. All right. All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, you have the January financial report in your packet. There we go. Okay. So starting off with our tax levy revenue for the month, we did receive $948,218. As you can see, we're $22,000 off from what we projected for the month. On non-levy revenue, we received $68,631, which was $119,000 off from what we projected. The biggest thing we realized on that was ambulance billing. That was down for this month. But again, year to date, though, we are looking good in that category. On the expense side, total personnel expenses were $997,954, which was under budget by $61,603. Vehicles and equipment at $54,779, which was under budget by $34,000. Utilities and communication at $22,944. Managerial expenses were at $68,125, which is under budget by $37,000, and capital and contingency is at $46,916, which is under budget by $137,914. So from a monthly perspective, as I mentioned, kind of in the budget workshop, we are trending under in most categories currently. When we get to year to date, here in a second, I'll show you where we're at from a year to date perspective, but realizing that a lot of, on the month, we're actually within a reasonable variance. On the year-to-date stuff where we're seeing a larger variance, it is because of some projects have been deferred a little bit, and some projects have even changed. So, and are going to get moved till next year, or some are going to just happen kind of later in the year, especially with like training and stuff. So on the year-to-date, our total revenue year to date is $11,269,000, which is over budget by $751,000. Mainly due to ambulance and wildland is why we're seeing that favorable variance there on the revenue side. Expenses are at $8.2 million, of which personnel accounts for $6,641,000, vehicles and equipment at $319,000, utilities and communication at $138,000, managerial expenses at $652,000, and our capital expenditure to date is $451,802. And we have not spent any of the $200,000 the board set aside for contingency. We have not spent any of those dollars at this point yet. So at this point in the year, where we're at percentage of expenses. So currently we've spent 48% of the budget, which gives us 52% remaining. Based on just months through the budget year, we should be at 58%. So we are trending under by about 10% right now from a year-to-date perspective. Where our money's going and why the personnel side is so important as we go through our budget process is that accounts for 81% of our total expenses. Then operations and managerial are both at 7% and capital at 5%. And one thing I'll note, as always, is most organizations are around the 80% of total expenses being personnel. Some go a little higher. I've not seen really any lower. It's kind of what the majority of organizations around the state and around the country, as far as fire organizations, are in that 75 to 85%. Really, when you go much above that, you start running into issues with funding your equipment and other purchases needed. Cash position and kind of the balance sheet snapshot year over year. You'll see we ended the month of January at $8,149,000 in total cash compared to $6 million last year. Our other assets, which is mainly our receivables, are at $351,000 compared to $699,000. So last year, although our cash is up, last year we had some more of our money just sitting in receivables, whereas this year we've already collected it. And you can see our liabilities are just under last year from $3.5 million to $3.2 million. The last thing I have in my report, unless there's any other questions, is I know last month you asked Melissa if we can kind of get back to you on kind of what some spending authorities are around the state. We went with some of our current clients as well as asked some other organizations that we do have communication with. And as you can see here, the spending authority really varies across the board, and the blue is what the spending authorities are, and this is for the fire chief. In the case of the city, it's for the city manager, and then the bottom, the orange line, is what their annual budgets are. So as we can see, some of these their spending authorities are relatively high, and others are kind of close to where Chief Kazian spending authority is currently. But again, when you see the spending authorities, it's important to note these spending authorities are authorized to spend budgeted dollars. It does not authorize these fire chiefs or city managers to go out and spend unbudgeted dollars. They still have to go to council or the boards for approval. But this is what they're allowed to spend within the board-approved budgets. So just wanted to give that information to the board as requested.
Okay, thank you.
Unless there's any questions, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the financial report?
I move to approve the financial report.
And a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor or discussion?
Aye.
All right. Fire chief report.
Fire chief report, as you have submitted, you can see it was a busy month for January. Almost 400 calls, 393 calls for the year. Kind of broke out as you would kind of expect with the year-to-date totals. Related to 2017 is up almost 60 calls. And so from there, I won't go through any other details unless you have any specific questions. One would have included a structure fire at the Senior Bob's, which you may see is no longer have a roof on it anymore, and they're remodeling that building. I have nothing else to report in the calls unless there's a question. Looking at the community risk, John, if you'd like to share a little bit on community risk.
Continues to be busy as in the past week.
Mike's not on.
We continue to be busy. In the past week, I've had right at 20 plans dropped off for plans reviews, so it's extremely busy right now as far as that goes. We are working on a weekly public safety message. We should have that up and running in the next probably 2 weeks. We'll be getting out a public education weekly message for not just fire safety, but safety in general. And you'll be interested to know, Board Member Soto, that we are just finalizing up the training that's going to be going out to the shifts for engine company inspections. We hope to have that in the next few weeks. We're going to start with one shift at one station, this station, get in the training so we can work out any bugs in the program. And I think you're aware that it's going to be a engine company inspection, risk hazard assessment, and pre-planning kind of all wrapped up into one. So that will be coming along shortly.
To date, what's the overall feel from the firefighter at the stations? How are they receiving this information, this idea?
I haven't talked to a lot of them, but it seems to be pretty positive. They're looking forward to getting out into the structures and seeing what the hazards are, and just becoming more familiar with the fire service features of the building and the hazards that they face. And I think overall it's positive.
I know it's been more than just you working on this, and I'd just like to thank
yeah.
your staff for putting this program together, all involved. It should be a good program once it gets on the ground.
I will pass that along.
Thank you.
Some of them are here tonight, but I will pass that along to those that aren't. So thank you.
John?
Yes.
Question, what kind of plan reviews are you, what are you seeing out there? What's going on?
Well, we are doing plans reviews for tenant occupancies, not tenant occupancies, but tenant improvements, new home construction, and fire sprinkler systems. Those are the big three that we get the most of. We also see a lot of kitchen hood suppression systems and kitchen hood systems in restaurants, but those are further between, but probably 1 or 2 a month of those.
Are you seeing any major developments coming through right now?
There are, in case you haven't driven past in the village, I think they've almost got the old outlet mall, the building on the north side, completely knocked down. That's where the Westin is going to be built. We have some, I did receive some plans just the other day for I think it was a 13-unit apartment building, but there have been some conceptual plans and meetings for other larger residential style buildings. Hampton Inn was proposing, I think, 180 some odd units out in the village. There's also looking at some apartment buildings off of Highway 89A here in West Sedona. So there are many that haven't gone beyond the conceptual stage yet, but they're very serious about them, and I hear that they're moving forward with them. So to be quite honest with you, I'm surprised that I haven't got plans on a couple of those as of today, but they could show up any day now.
When you drive around and look, there's an inordinate amount of single-family residents that are being built that may not get our attention because they're not requiring sprinklers. Mm-hmm. So I drove through the last couple of weeks just looking at, there's houses popping up everywhere. And so when you look at that, the growth that we saw, the 5.3 or 5.25 growth in assessed value, the new growth part that gets added into that, it's new growth or new buildings, as well as if there's I think it's over 25%. If they do a 25% or greater improvement, they get reevaluated. It becomes a new money, so to speak, or resets to 5%. But and then once these homes get on the tax rolls and get rolling, we're using 18-month to 24-month delay for us to see them come on the tax rolls. But that's why I think we're seeing some larger numbers than we were projecting, because it's hard to gauge how much those houses are going to be worth and what the impacts are going to be on the front end. I also want to say that the program that John and his crew and the staff and operations folks that are working on the pre-plan company inspection piece, we're not just going in and doing the inspection. We're actually producing the pre-plans and creating some tangible documents that'll be valuable not just for those crews that are there, but will enhance our entire operation and take it to the next level type stuff. So the technology we're using and doing will be do it, and it uploads to the next, and just the workflow is impressive.
One last question. Is there a non-compliance component to this program if you come across an occupant who just doesn't want to comply?
Well, we have, it happens from time to time, and in our fee schedule, we have re-inspection fees that we can put on. But as I've said in the past, and we talked about like with the false alarm ordinance, my goal is not to be a revenue generator, but I want people, get the fire extinguisher you need. The fire that you prevent may save your life. It may save one of our firefighters' lives. And so it's a tool that we try to use sparingly, but sometimes it becomes necessary. And there's been multiple times where we've gone back out and it's, hey, the $75 reinspection fee, use it to buy your fire extinguisher. I don't want the money. I want you to be safe. I want our firefighters as safe as possible. And it works most of the time.
Thank you.
Moving on to grants. So the Pulse Point grant that we received, we've talked about in the past. We're still working through our regional partners to get confirmation that there's a regional support for the annual maintenance that goes with that. So we're hoping that we get some folks to agree that regionally it's a good way to go, so we can share that $8,000 cost amongst our entire region. And so we're hoping that comes to fruition. We've reapplied to a grant at Walmart for $2,500 for car seats, as well as we submitted 2 assistance to firefighter grants. One was for mobile radios for $36,000, I'm sorry. Another one was for a Type 3 engine that of $280,000. That's, again, in our capital projects budget. We applied for that last year. We're declined, so we retweaked the grant and tried to see if we can get that through this time around. And so they funded trucks like that. We just weren't lucky enough to get it funded as others did. So we're working hard at relieving the expense opportunities in our budget where we can, and we'll see what happens. Any questions on that? There's some matching funds in there as well.
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned car seats. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program?
Sure. So we get car seats donated from Walmart and sometimes from the Governors of Highway Safety grant and things like that provide car seats. And so people come in that are in the community that need a car seat, can't afford a car seat, and we install them properly. We have certified technicians that are able to install them. It's kind of crazy, but there's a 40-hour class recertification you need to take to maintain that certification. And how many car seats do you think we installed, John? Hard to say.
Probably 20 in the last year. Probably 20.
So 20-ish in the last year we do.
How does that work? How do people qualify to get?
They show up at the fire station and ask for some assistance, and we provide it. It's not based on much more than they're there. They need help, and we have car seats for that. We have the different types, so the boosters and the high back boosters and the actual infant seat and infant carrier. We've got all the different types based upon the age. And for the most part, the folks that come in and need our help probably qualify income. If there was a qualification income-wise, they would probably qualify.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't put too many in BMWs or Mercedes.
If we do, they bring their own typically.
And yeah,
Install their own.
and that's another important part. I thanks John for mentioning that. So if someone does, it is technical to put in and sometimes challenging until you're really shown how to put them in. And so A lot of people do bring their own if they are capable, but they want to be shown how to do it, and so they do bring their own as well. So that's a very important part as well. It's a great service, and so it's good stuff. Training, anything on training, Jeff, that throw you on the spot? Is there anything that's ringing a bell on there for you as far as bringing up? We're doing wildland training right now, getting our folks up to speed on 190 refresher.
Yeah, the blue card training for our operations folks. It's the tactical training that our folks go through for fire ground and EMS, hazardous materials, and the like. That was just completed with our next level of folks that are hitting their 4- and 5-year points that are getting ready to test up into the next level of the organization. That was just completed in-house with our certified instructors. We have a number of folks that are pursuing their degree requirements for promotional considerations, and we also have a person that's in the doctorate program.
Important to remember that blue card training we're speaking to, that was funded by a grant. I think we had an $86,000 grant that started that program as well. And it was interesting because the folks that did this are lower tiered, meaning they were less senior folks in positions that don't have command opportunities as much. We did the higher tiers and the higher trained folks, ranked folks. And anyway, this group came around, and apparently our folks that were doing the trainers that we have in-house were amazed at the quality of their skill sets, having not been in those difficult positions and making those decisions. Part of it, they believe, is because we've indoctrinated the program, and they're hearing it. It's not new anymore. It's part of our program for the last 3 or 4 years now. But they put them through some pretty difficult scenarios, and we had some folks that knocked it out of the park that have never been in the hot seat and never had to make those kind of decisions. And so it's pretty cool to see and hear that that's the kind of level of skill sets that our folks are getting through training and experience and day-to-day operations.
Chief, if I could ask you
Sure.
a quick question on that. This blue card concept, when is it used? Is it used here in incidents here in town? Is it used when they go mutual aid out of state? How is it utilized?
So the blue card training is a certification, or a certification, I guess is what you call it, recognition of incident command of Type 4 and Type 5 incidents, which is your run-of-the-mill, SFD response. We use it on car accidents. It's through a size up. It's through a assuming command and a process. The common terminology that we use when we're in those situations creates a common operating picture for all people that would be responding to the scene or listening, so that everyone has the same level of training. And so we size up car accidents the same way. We size up a fire alarm the same way. We size up a working structure fire the same way, so that it's everyone coming on the scene knows what, should have a mental picture of what's happening based upon all using the same terminology. So we use it here. Actually, many of the departments in the region are also going to that training, and it's a best practice. It's not mandated, but it's a best practice, and it's good stuff.
Thank you.
Anything else on that, Jeff? Last thing I got on my formal report is just donations. We received $301.22 for donations for the month, and so we appreciate the kindness of those who make those donations. Continuing on my report, just kind of updating SFD activities. I'll turn it over to Jeff for the first 3 items.
Board members, the Communications Center, City of Cottonwood, we contract with for dispatch services. So the dispatchers, when they receive the call, process it, and in most cases, we're doing medical calls and processing that we measure. Those are the critical urgent pieces that we lay our performance criteria on based upon the national standard. And it's a fractile standard of 2 minutes if we use EMD, which is emergency medical dispatch, to determine the severity of the medical incident. The maximum time to process a call and turn it out is 2 minutes 90% of the time. So 9 out of 10 times you have to produce these calls within 2 minutes to hit the standard. The City of Cottonwood last month hit the benchmark of 1 minute and 52 seconds. And this is an incremental improvement since we started reviewing the numbers when we took the contract to Cottonwood. They were in the mid to high 2 minute processing piece, and they've been continuously looking at their workflows and process pieces to get it down to where they're continuously improving it. For the year of 2017, they're at 1 minute and 59 seconds. So what that means is in urgent calls, so it's not all the calls. You heard we had 400 calls almost last month in January. These were 88 urgent code 3 responses, medical calls, fire calls that we responded to. In 2017, it was 1,069 urgent calls, medical, fire, fire alarm notices with flow activity that we responded to. And again, they were still processing under the 1 minute, under the 2 minute benchmark. One other piece that we were pulling through our analysis was our total reflex. So from the time the 911 dispatcher picks up the line to answer the 911 call on our side, not the police or sheriff's department or DPS side, but just our side, to the time that we arrive on the scene, total reflex time. So that includes our guys and gals getting their turnout gear if they have to put the turnout gear on, but getting onto the rig, turning on the rig, driving down the road in traffic to get to the incident. In 2017, 947 of those calls were measured in urgent mode for this total reflex piece because they could have been canceled en route. And that response time was, again, in fractile 90% of the time, 8 minutes and 34 seconds. Average was 6 minutes and 10 seconds. So in a suburban rural response zone, which is kind of where we sit in this region, that's well within a standard approach to response. And that's for the first unit arriving on the scene to assess and begin stabilization. As we go through the accreditation process, this data is utilized to build up the story about getting all of the resources, particularly in the fire that they measure, or through cardiac arrest that it has national standard criteria to begin developing with the help of Chief Mazulis's software that we're using for our EKG information, is to identify patient contact, time the patient's been provided ACLS or paramedic care, and the time that we take or begin the treatment pieces, stabilize, and or begin transport to the definitive care facility. So all of these measures are going to be built in. Our GIS person, Tammy Schuerman, has been tasked with now helping us begin doing the data analytics, and she's really taking it to heart and building a number of profiles to help the battalion chiefs and captains begin assessing and monitoring their performance from turnout time, which is getting the call and going to the rig, to measuring our response times once we get out of the station and hit the streets. There are some traffic pieces that come into play that are out of our control, but we know that we can at least measure the impacts of traffic and tell a story relative to what's happening out there in our service model.
Chief, if I understand you correctly, the overall time of a minute 90% of the time, plus the response time is falling in that area of six plus minutes, which really equates to a response time of 4-ish, slightly over 4 minutes.
That would be the 6 minutes would be the average. So 50% of the time we're there 6 minutes. So about 2 minutes of processing on average.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on average at 50%. Let me see. So that's 90% of the time at 2 minute processing.
Understood.
At 50% of the time, they're processing a call in just over 1 minute.
Okay, thank you.
So the fractile is a that's where the accreditation model talks, and it's quite a different story when you say your average response time is this number versus 90% of the time we get to calls at this number. It's a data analytic piece. It's a way to look at things. We've talked about fractiles, and we really will be migrating towards the fractile process much more than the average, because the average doesn't. Well, it's a number that's important, and you look at data. That 90% fractile is far more important for you as a board, us as an agency, to understand how quick we're getting to calls, how quick we're processing calls 90% of the time. I think it gives you a much more clear picture than the average does. So we'll be working towards making that migration in our reporting process, and certainly the accreditation works solely on fractile type responses.
Thank you.
The strategic plan update, staff and 2 board members attended the strategic plan update session with Cliff Jones, retired Tempe fire chief, and has been working with fire departments throughout the nation, in fact the world, on helping them with accreditation process as well as updating critical pieces for business planning, the strategic plan. We have the draft back. It's currently gone back to the program managers for review, and that just came in Friday, I believe it was. And so it just went out this morning to all the folks to begin review, make their edits, and then bring it back to me to send it back to Cliff for review, and then give us the final product to present to the fire board.
Happy with the process, went well, and good dialogues, and
It's taken a different track from the last 2015 plan, which was kind of a response to a crisis approach to business. This one's taken it more to the programmatic management under a strategic concept that aligns all of the divisions and programs within the plan to focus on what they're providing, create benchmarks and thresholds, and report to such on a regular basis so that we can identify how things are rolling and going. And then report back to department heads, the fire chief and the fire board, what the progress is or not occurring, and why not. So it's a different approach.
Yeah, I was totally amazed at when I came on this board. We had just completed the one that was in place now, but there was only 5 or 6 points that were our targets for the strategic plan. Maybe a few more, maybe a few less. This one has 3 times the amount, and the ability to have checks and balances throughout the course of the plan is probably another major component of it that will now be part of it that wasn't there before.
yeah, I would say that the difference is in this one we became more focused on specific areas and broke it down, where the other one was more strategic, overarching, and it didn't have, if it was be more efficient and respond quicker. I don't know, making one up. Who does that? How do we do it? How do we measure it? Response times are one way, and there's a whole bunch of, but it can look different. This is more pigeonholed in EMS, and Ed's in charge of EMS. So here's the things he's doing in EMS, and he knows exactly what he needs to do and where he's going and how he's going to get there or not. There's CRM, and so it's broken up by here. So it's definitely a different focus and aligns a little bit better with the accreditation process as we begin to, again, line all the stars for that process to occur. And so it's good stuff.
Ambulance 561, that's the unit that suffered a fire in the patient compartment electronics wall, if you will. The mechanic has replaced as much as he can. He's ordered the parts from Braun Northwest Ambulance and waiting for those to arrive to finish the final touches and then put it all back together again. Braun is in the business of building ambulances and providing parts that break on a regular basis. And this was a part that's in a production line that they need to pull in, pull out, and send to us. But those parts are in order. There's no ETA yet, but it's almost ready to get back online.
Working through the insurance company?
The insurance company has funded the repairs to it, and we're doing the final assessment once we get that final part in and get cost recovery for not only the parts, but the mechanic's time as well.
With that, I think the next is legislative update. Just want to let you guys know that I've been spending a little time down at the Capitol, enjoying beautiful Phoenix down there at the Capitol Hill. It's always fun to be there. I was there for, we opposed, the fire districts and the fire chiefs and the group opposed a bill that would have changed the ability to affect fire flow. So in rural Arizona, where we need fire flow, we need water, we need hydrants, we need, when they build a subdivision, there was some legislation that was going to exempt folks from having to provide water in those areas with certain criteria. So we opposed that. That bill actually is dead at this point and appears to not be going anywhere. So we were successful with our presence, and those that spoke at that one. I was not there for that, but I was there to support. And then I actually spoke on another bill to support the State Fire College fire school that is put on every year. The funding for that gets swept every year. They have to fight for that money. It's a $172,000 they were trying to get funded, or at least locked in the budget. So I actually spoke on behalf of the fire chiefs and fire districts needing that to keep our firefighters across the state educated and trained. It's the main source of training for many rural organizations. We send people there every year. We have people that instruct at that every year. And so that, so far, I believe has been tracking with some success to get through both houses and things. I sent you a couple other documents along the way every other week or so, trying to keep you informed on what's happening legislatively. It's really important that you as a board look at some of those parts and pieces. There's certainly legislation out there that would be very detrimental to fire districts and their funding. And certainly as board members, you're able to consider your involvement in any of those legislative issues as well. Many fire districts have board members who are very active in legislative issues, and others don't. Not mandated, but just letting you know that there are some things out there, and I try to point those out when I send them to you to look at this particular one or that particular one. Mr. Flynn from Arizona Fire District Association tends to highlight those pretty well in his email, so I don't have to do much other than forward it. But I do recommend you pay attention. There are other funding, fire district funding, or not fire district, but taxation bills that are out there that will dramatically affect funding if passed, and have impacts that would be of concern for public safety. So pay attention to those. Any questions? St. Patrick's Day, the always ever exciting 46th annual or something like that, 45th, I'm not sure which it is. St. Patrick's Day parade will be held on March 17th. If anyone on the board would like to participate, we would be happy to put you up in a fire truck or a UTV of sort to parade you around and wave and smile at everybody. So let us know if you're so interested. We will have fire trucks participating as we do every year, and I think that's arrive at the station at 8 o'clock to get loaded up and be ready to go. I think it kicks off at 10:30, so it could be snowing those days, or it could be hot. Who knows? So please let me know if you're interested in attending as a board member, and we'll get a sign made up for you and such. So I'm going to pass on the next two to HR. Betty, I got Route 66 and staffing.
Yes, thank you. So we are a part of an organization in the state called the Wellness Council of Arizona, based out of Tucson, but it includes many employers throughout the state that have wellness programs, and we're one of those employers that has an active wellness program. For the last couple of years, this council has hosted a virtual event for the employers and their staff to step so many steps during a certain period of time. This year, we're participating in the Route 66 Step Challenge, which began February 5th, and we are ideally, each of us who are participating, stepping 8,000 times a day, and we're tracking that through our Fitbit and other types of tracking devices to the Wellness Council website so we can see how we're doing. There are over 40 to 50 employers, and we happen to have 26 participants who are joining the Step Challenge. And I just wanted to tell you, after 2 weeks and a couple of days, how we're doing. The 26 participants have stepped a total of, 2 weeks and 2 days, over 3.4 million steps. That's a lot. We're averaging per participant for those 2 weeks 131,000 steps. So we have a lot of great participants here. What's neat is it's a challenge that we are participating and talking about. We're getting moving. We're walking during the day for those of us in admin. But the cost to do this is being offset by the credit that Blue Cross is giving us for our wellness program. So our participant fees, we're getting reimbursed for. The tracking devices for many of our folks, the 26 people, we're getting reimbursed for. So there's no cost to the district, and it's bringing the group together in an active challenge. So I just wanted to let you know about that.
What's pretty cool is you can actually, it's a virtual, so you can look on the map and see where you are from Chicago on your way to Santa Monica, and see where you are on the map without having to actually travel. It's pretty cool and it's fun, healthy. I'm slacking here at 4,200 steps in case anyone's wondering where I am at this point today. But I will go to the gym after this and make up a few. But it's fun, and thanks to Betty for heading that up. And the
Some
team.
of our guys, like Jeff Scalf, they stop by and say, I'm at 20,000 for the day. It's amazing. So they're getting a lot of steps. Our ops guys are helping us out a lot. The other topic I wanted to share with you is where we are in staffing, because we are in flux with some staffing. Some good news, we are just finished our testing for the firefighter, annual firefighter assessment. 38 candidates showed up to be tested last week. I'm not sure this is working. 38 candidates showed up, and we are in the midst of pulling the scores together for the practicals and the oral boards, and we should have an eligibility list early next week so we know who our top candidates are when we have openings for the firefighter position. We don't have any right now, but we will probably in the next few months through the summer. We're also recruiting for Tricia's position, the executive assistant. I have 6 top-notch candidates coming in on Tuesday to come through an assessment center and oral boards, and I'd like to thank Board Member Soto, who is going to assist us in the oral boards for the chief's interview in the afternoon. So hopefully we'll have somebody identified by the end of the day next Tuesday. We have reposted our telecom tech position. Remember, we spent a year here talking about that open position and how many candidates we got. We've had to repost that, and I'm getting some good candidates in through the door and over to Bob to review. And we will be filling our ambulance billing position here with a young lady who used to work here. Amy Hedman worked here for a couple of years, left us last August. She has come back on a part-time temp basis, and as of next week, she'll be in a full-time position again to help Chris in the ambulance billing area. So those are the 4 areas of staffing that we're working on right now.
Thank you. Thanks.
And I think that concludes our fire chief report for the month.
Okay. I'll move on. False alarm ordinance.
Board, as you recall, you had asked for some review and alterations to the fire alarm, false alarm ordinance, so we sent John back to the drawing board, and I believe he's done some work, so I'll let him.
Yes, as per your direction last month, there was some, the feeling from the board was that we should look at upping the fees of the false alarm ordinance, and then also develop some sort of appeal process. So I have reworked that ordinance. The initial fee for, if you'll recall, they will not be charged any fees until the 3rd false alarm in any 365-day period. As we discussed last month, this is not, again, not a revenue generation device, but something to spur them to take care of the problems, to maintain their systems so that they don't issue false alarms. This is not aimed at the person that accidentally burns a pizza once in a while. These are for ongoing maintenance issues, typically at commercial occupancies where they know they have an issue and they are refusing to fix the problem, and it keeps issuing false alarms. So they wouldn't receive any sort of charge until the 3rd false alarm. We up that from $25 to $75. The 4th false alarm would get them a fee of $250, and the 5th and subsequent fees would be charged at $500. Again, our goal is to get them to make the needed changes in their maintenance program to avoid any false alarms at all. So after we get a couple of those false alarms, we're going to go to them and say, look, this is where we're at. You obviously have some maintenance issues that need to be addressed. Let's take care of that before it starts costing you money. Again, as we talked, one of the biggest dangers our firefighters face is when they're responding to calls. It causes complacency, as we had spoken about. Every time we show up here, it's a false alarm, and the 15th time they show up, that's when the actual fire happens, and they're completely unprepared for it. So getting those systems maintained and in good working order and not issuing false alarms is good for everybody.
Again, this is focused mainly on commercial, I would assume.
I guess it could apply to residential. It doesn't specify in there, but it's not the residential alarms that we typically have problems with. So I guess it could apply to residential, but those just aren't the ones that are the repeat offenders.
Okay. And again, it focused on the mechanical issues. I
Exactly.
think we used the example last month of the school. having
Yeah,
multiple
exactly.
false alarms.
Yeah, if you've got a kid that pulls a pull station, that's obviously not an alarm malfunction. That was a malicious false alarm. We'll deal with the person that issued that malicious alarm versus they've got a maintenance issue that every time it rains, the roof leaks and runs down to the smoke detector and it issues a false alarm at that detector. Those are the types of issues that we're looking at addressing.
John?
Yes, sir.
How will you go about, if this is approved tonight, how will you go about notifying the public about this? Will you contact the offenders, the repeat offenders directly, or?
Sure. We have a list of people that are in the last. I think one of our repeat offenders has. I want to say right now today they're sitting at 10 false alarms in the last 365 days. I'm certainly not going to just walk out there and say, "Here we go. We're going to start charging you." I'm going to say, "Look, here we're starting with a clean slate from today. You have a history of 10 false alarms in the last 365 days. We're starting the clock today. Know that we have a false alarm ordinance. Our goal is not to take your money. Our goal is to get the alarm fixed. So we know there's a problem here already. Let's fix the problem so that we don't get into that." I will also obviously do a press release so that the word gets out, and anybody that's currently on that list, we're gonna make contact with them and let them know that we, from this point forward, we do have a mechanism to deal with it. Let's solve the problems.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or motion?
John, if I could ask real quick, was there a resolution number in the
Number one, was that right?
Tricia wasn't here to check with. We think it's number one. We don't think we've done any resolutions this year, so we're pretty confident.
Okay, Mr. Whittington will give you how to make the motion then, if you want, Bill.
Thanks. Mr. Chair, there's a couple ways you can do this. If you knew the ordinance number that you were going to rely on in order to adopt this provision, you could just make reference to it. If we don't have a particular ordinance number, I meant resolution number. But if you don't have a particular resolution to refer to, you can simply authorize the adoption of the fire code alarm.
False alarm.
Let me think of the way to say this. Bear with me. To adopt the district fire alarm code modification as presented.
Anyone want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. Bill, could you repeat the proper terminology for that?
Mr. Chairman, if the board is inclined to approve the code provision presented, I would recommend you entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the fire district fire alarm code provision as presented.
You can just say so moved.
Yeah. Well, then in that case, I'd like to make a motion to approve the fire district's fire alarm code provision as stated before us.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
That's right. The next, you'll probably have talking parts coming up. Next one is just a little quick presentation and an acknowledgement of our employees who were recognized at our 2017 employee recognition. Folks are doing great jobs every single day in our organization, go above and beyond the call of duty. All can be recognized, but we formally recognize folks at our annual awards dinner, and so I'll let Betty go ahead and make some comments on that.
I'd like to let you know who the winners were, the different awards, and tell you first the award and then the winner of that award, a little bit about why. Our first award was the Firefighter of the Year, and firefighter Jonathan King won for his work on the CCR training, Zoll data interpretation, and for getting feedback to the crews. To the crews.
That was not on. You got to turn that one on.
Oh, that was not on. Testing. Getting data back to the
Doesn't like it.
Just go with it.
It's like I've got a little ghost back here. Data back to the crews. He also played a key role in the Arbinger training for that year. Our Officer of the Year was Ed Mazulis, our division chief. He was presented the award for his oversight of training this past year, for getting the crews the equipment that they needed, and for his work on the CIP program. The Administrative Support Staff Person of the Year is sitting right over here. Carla Duport won for all of the work that she has done to keep the CRM department together. John called her the glue of the department, and she has offered her support and assistance daily to that team. The Customer Service Award winner was Matthew Fleece. He was our captain who retired just recently. He won this award for assistance and support to our admin team this past year. As he was on light duty, he was located here in our administrative office. He had a great willingness and a positive attitude towards helping everybody in our admin team, and he has exceptional organizational skills. Our Community Service Award winner was Tyler Wu. He won this award because of his work and efforts on the Toys for Tots and the MDA Fill the Boot campaigns. The Outstanding Citizen of the Year is Corey Cooperman, former SFD board member who served 6 years on the board with grace, composure, and elegance. She brought a common sense, thoughtful reasonability to the decisions made on behalf of SFD. Our Unit Citation Award winners were Battalion Chief Jason Coyle, Captain Josh Wells, and Firefighter Jonathan King. They won for their work with staff on the Arbinger training. They spent a lot of hours this past year training our staff in the Arbinger method. And we had a Distinguished Service Award winner. That was our past employee, Tricia Greer. She was presented with this award for her almost 24 years of dedicated service to the district. She had demonstrated consistently positive impact on her coworkers and on the SFD governing board. We'd like to recognize all of these winners.
That was a great employee dinner. I think they did a great job.
It's great. Thank you to the committee who put that together as well, and lots of fun and great to recognize our folks each and every day, but making that formal opportunity. Next item on the board is Jeff Pachura's item.
Do you want to call it?
Go ahead.
All right, so this is the purchase of 2 vehicles to replace 2 older vehicles in the fleet, and it's a part of the capitalization plan and budgeted expenditure piece approved by the Fire Board at the beginning of this year. We're replacing a 1997 Ford van that has just over 100,000 miles on it, a 2000 S10 Chevy Blazer with just over 139,000 miles on it. The Blazer was actually acquired through state surplus, which was already abused when we got it, and we just kind of finished it off. The 2 vehicles being requested for replacement are a part of our fleet standardization program. One is, and they're all 2018 vehicles, Ford pickups. One is an F-150 4x4 pickup, and the other one's an F-350 4x4 pickup. Both vehicles are being assigned, one, the 350 to general use for operations and for wildland deployment, and the F-150 is being assigned to the IT division, which is where the S-10 came out of, for its use. And it's required for 4-wheel drive to supplement technicians up at the tower sites, as well as any other work that we could utilize it for in emergency operations. We can pull it in and perform those tasks as needed. We use the state bid contract system, which has a number of vendors assigned to it. Sanderson Ford is on the state contract. Jones Ford is a local vendor that we asked for pricing on to give them a shot at it. Sanderson Ford, the state contract bid, was the best bid and the lowest bid, and that was for $67,366.80 for both vehicles. Staff is recommending purchase.
Okay, is it a budgeted item?
It is.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Chief, I have a couple questions for you, or 2 questions. The F-350 is a pretty heavy-duty vehicle. What capacity is that going to be placed into? And the second question is, what's to become of the 2 vehicles that are no longer in service?
I'll do the easy one first. The 2 vehicles that are being surplused will be surplused out of our system once the new vehicles arrive, and we have an approved government surplus website that we post these vehicles on. And in the last year, we've been very successful in utilizing it and not only surplusing vehicles, but also equipment as well. Once we get the vehicles in, the board will have to approve the official surplus of those, and so that will be coming to you when these other ones arrive and go in service. The F-350, it's a heavier chassis, heavy suspension, as you know, and our REM team, which is our Rapid Emergency Medic team that goes to fires along, particularly in this region along the rim, to support fire operations and firefighters that are in steep country. They carry a lot of high-angle rescue equipment, Stokes baskets, a lot of rope, plus their deployment gear, Stokes basket, and everything else. So it needs a heavy suspension to, 1, handle the roads, 2, to handle the equipment load and the burden that it'll have. It'll have 4 people on board as well. So we don't hire light people. We hire sturdy stock folks. And then also, because it's an F-350, it puts us up into a different rate recovery with state and federal fee assessments that we can recover when we go on these assignments. And within 2 years, they're suggesting we would recover the difference in cost between a 150, 250, and a 350. And then it's a better recovery rate for us.
Our REM team was requested a couple times this year, wasn't it?
It has been. It's been deployed a number of times, and they've used a 2-door extended cab pickup, 3/4 ton, and it's really tight with 4 people in there with all the equipment.
Any other comments, questions, or motion?
Ready for motion? On this?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I move to approve purchase order 1660 for the purchase of 1 Ford F-150 4x4 pickup truck and 1 Ford F-350 4x4 pickup truck from Don Sanderson Ford, which is an Arizona state contract, for the total cost of $67,366.80, utilizing the $67,000 in budgeted capital and other capital budget funds.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. SFD Public Safety Personnel Retirement System position. We tabled this last month as we were waiting for the next board member to arrive. We did seat our new board member. We did appoint our new board member last night. However, with the 24-hour requirement, he was not able to sit at the meeting tonight. My suggestion would be that we table this again until next month, as that was our intention, was that we wouldn't fill that seat until we had a full board. Anybody have any issues with that?
Mr. Chair, or Mr. Legal, we do have a hearing on the 1st of March. Is being a board member absent from that hearing? Just someone's not there to represent the board. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, that's just a matter of having a quorum. As long as you have a
Correct.
quorum, you can take action.
Okay.
Do we need a motion on that, or is that a consensus item?
No, you can do by consensus.
Okay, we'll table that to next month. Legal interpretation regarding release of February 1, 2012 executive session minutes. We received a memo from legal counsel that release of that was not going to be possible. You want to speak to that briefly?
Yes. Folks, you were kind enough to allow us to take a second look at the rules relating to the release of executive session minutes. There's some case law to suggest you may not do so even by unanimous consent, and that caused us to reverse our recommendation and to suggest to you that those minutes cannot be released except for very limited circumstances that are statutorily mandated. You don't meet those circumstances. So my recommendation is you take no action at all because your motion to approve was conditioned upon approval by legal counsel.
Okay. There's one more item on the agenda, Tim. I believe it's your item.
Well, I really just want to bring the board up to date on what's going on with my residency. I put my house on the market last fall here in Sedona, and with the purpose of trying to consolidate two homes into one, I have a property in Williams, a 10-acre parcel where I keep my toys, boats, and RVs and so forth. And so my house sold. It hasn't. It's still going through the process of closing. I sold it a few weeks ago, and it's scheduled to close if everything goes according to plan. It would probably close around the first week of March 5th to 9th, somewhere in there. I also purchased another home, not in the district, because I couldn't find a property with acreage in the district that really met my needs in my price range. So that also is scheduled to close the week of March 5th. I don't know if they're going to close for sure yet. There's always a possibility that one could fall out of escrow. So I guess what I'm doing is trying to put the board on notice that if the sales go through, then this would be my last meeting because I wouldn't be living in the district. So my intent would be to inform the chair if that happens, and then this would be my last meeting. So I just want to bring up to date on that.
Okay. We appreciate you letting us know. And I spoke with Mr. Whittington, and the point at which your house closes and you're no longer a resident, he's effectively no longer a board member. Is that correct? Okay. So you'll keep me informed?
I will.
Okay. All right. John?
A couple of weeks ago, I met with other Yavapai County emergency service providers, fire departments, police departments, sheriff's office, the whole deal. We were discussing having a unified safety message as a group, specifically directed at wildfire season. And what we decided on was the Ready, Set, Go campaign, which was developed, I believe, by CAL FIRE. But the whole gist of this program is being ready for wildfire, defensible space around your home, not waiting. This message is going to be coming out over the next couple of weeks. But if you wait until wildfire season, it's too late. We've talked about this. Anyway, ready, creating defensible space around your house. Set, during wildfire season, you need to have things ready to leave at a moment's notice. And go, when directed to go, you need to go. No waiting around, no trying to get other stuff together. You should be gone and out the door. So that is my safety message. Ready, set, go. You'll be seeing more of that in the media in the next coming weeks.
Yeah, after the fires this year in California, it's something to be thinking about here as well. All right. Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.